also still a member of this faculty. Honorary. Do I see any other deans? No, I don't see any other deans. Former deans, yes. Professor Paul Rees. Good afternoon, Prof. Rees. Always a pleasure to see you, sir. Where is our deputy dean? I know I saw her earlier. Where is Prof. Tanisha? Here? On her way back. Okay. So, if there are any other, well, yes, associate deans. I see Dr. Nadale is still all the way up in the back. That's not quite the middle, but okay. Heads of departments, colleagues, other specially invited guests, friends, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Sorry. Our former principal has also just walked in, Professor Dale Weber. Good afternoon, sir. And thanks to you all for joining us this afternoon in our celebration of Professor Ina Vandebroek's wonderful accomplishment. We are very happy to have you here. Now, I have been indirectly instructed to make sure and keep time. And I have to say that for those of you that know me, that I try to do as I am told. Right? So much so, and this is a true story, a couple of days ago, at home, and again, for those of you that know me, I have a board of directors. The chair of that board is my wife. The other members are my children. And I have some shareholders, and those are my sisters. I have 5 of them. All right?
All women.
Everybody is all women, right? There is one other male, that's my son. However, my wife was at home. She was in her home office. We have a little dog. He was lying beside her, and she had gotten up, and she was walking towards me. I was walking towards another room, much as I am here now. Now, I take pleasure in the fact that I believe I've trained the dog in some rudimentary commands, sit, stay, so on and so forth, right? And so as she's walking toward me, and I'm walking to the other room, she says, "Wait there." So I stop, and I say, "Hold on. Me or the dog you're talking to?" And so she laughs, and I laugh, and so, Prof. Ina, I will keep to my time. I believe, is this Your Excellency?
Yes.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. We also have Her Excellency, Ambassador to Belgium, Madam Ellen de Geest. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us. And so I'm sure at some point in time, you've been asked, as I have, a simple question, relatively simple. Do you enjoy your job? And at least for me, there are some things that I consider. Foremost among those is the people that I work with. And over the last recent few years, Prof. Ina has been one of those people. And it has been an absolute pleasure working with Prof. Ina. Her intellect, her demeanor, how calm and reassuring that she can be, has been wonderful as a member of the committee that I chair. Not for too much longer, but I've had quite a great many occasions on exchanging ideas and having chats with Prof. Ina. It has been very much a pleasure. And so from me personally, congratulations on your achievement. I know that you want to hear from others, and I know that the members of the audience would much rather hear about what you have done and to hear you than to hear me. And so I would now like to invite our Dean, Professor Michael Taylor, to come and just bring some greetings so that we can get closer to the main event this afternoon. Prof. Taylor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm afraid of what will happen if I don't keep time. So I'm just going to adopt all the protocols that Dr. Busby Earl have provided and simply say, what a wonderful pleasure it is to be here. I will acknowledge, of course, the person of the hour, Prof. Ina Vandebroek, and say, again, also what a wonderful pleasure it is to be here. Let me say in my few remarks that it is a joy as Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology to be here bringing greetings on this important occasion. You see, in the life of a faculty, an inaugural professorial lecture carries great significance. These are not everyday occurrences. Clearly, this makes it more than just another lecture. This is a signal occasion. These lectures stand in a long tradition spanning more than 7 decades of this university's existence. This then makes it kind of like a hallowed occasion. And these occasions invoke a sense of awe because of the excellence that brings us together. This then makes it an inspirational occasion. And so when you move from signal through hallowed, through inspirational, for all these reasons, this is a special moment in the life of a faculty. And so for me as a dean, and particularly one in the closing months of his tenure, I count it not just pure joy, but also a deep honor to bring these greetings on behalf of our faculty and to simply say, thank you, Prof. Ina, for allowing us to share in this occasion. But colleagues, as I reflected on today, and especially on whose inaugural lecture we are attending, it struck me that I have to say just a few things, and I will be short, I promise you. I have to say that it struck me that this is not just a momentous moment, it is actually a significant statement. And let me explain. You see, firstly, today is as much a commendation of individual achievement as it is a celebration of institutional gain. Yes, today marks our public acclamation of our colleague's promotion to the rank of professor, a remarkable personal milestone. But even as we commend her elevation, we also celebrate how her work has in turn elevated us as a faculty. Through her scholarship, she has built an internationally recognized research profile of exceptional scholarly impact and continued relevance, and I'm quoting one of her assessors. Through her work, she has expanded the reach of ethnobotany and ethnobiology beyond our faculty, while making sure it always pointed back to our faculty. And through her work, she has enhanced the global standing of this university. Let me say it another way. Her success has become our strength. And so while today acclaims her achievement, it also affirms our growth. It is for that reason that I say you cannot miss that today is way more than a commendation of individual achievement. It is also a celebration of institutional gain. But let me go on quickly. Today is also much more than just a recounting of a personal journey of scholarship. Today is a recognition of the public purpose of that scholarship. Undoubtedly, those who will follow next and what you will hear from our honored guest, you will hear about the journey that brought Prof to this moment and thankfully brought her to our Jamaican shores. But if you listen carefully, I'm also sure that you are going to hear a little bit more. You will hear about research that centers Caribbean traditional knowledge, research that engages communities with respect and reciprocity, and research that contributes to the preservation of culture, biodiversity, and food security. Said another way, we're going to hear about work that calls for the respectful inclusion of traditional knowledge while honoring relationships within communities. Or we're going to hear that scholarship is not only about what we come to know, it is also about who we have come to serve through that knowledge. It is for that reason that I say that today is as much a recounting of a personal journey of scholarship as it is a recognition of the public purpose of that scholarship. And one last thing. Today, is as much a spotlighting on research insight as it is a signaling of research direction. Yes, we gather to recognize Prof. Ina's remarkable research insights. But professorship also asks, what's next? What direction does the body of work which we celebrate today point us toward? And here, the signal, as you are going to discover, is clear. Prof. Vandebroek's work bridges biological and social sciences, connects traditional knowledge with modern inquiry, and links local realities to global conversations. In doing so, its insights point us to a present and future where science, particularly Caribbean science, must be interdisciplinary, must be rooted in relationships, and must engage both knowledge systems and lived realities. So today reminds us that insights are not only to be admired, they are also to be followed. And it is for that reason that I can say that today is as much a spotlighting on research insight as it is a signaling of research direction. And so you understand why I suggest that today is not just a momentous occasion, but a significant statement. Because when an occasion reflects individual achievement that strengthens the institution, scholarship that serves a public purpose, and insight that signals a shared future, then that occasion is more than a ceremony. It becomes a statement that impeccable scholarship, impactful service, and innovative science do not need to compete, but can seamlessly combine. And when they do, they show us how a university can advance knowledge and society at the same time. Prof. Vandebroek, thank you for allowing us to share in this occasion. We celebrate you and your achievement. On behalf of the faculty, I offer warmest congratulations.
Thank you very much, Prof. Taylor. And as you would have heard, Prof. Taylor mentioned that Prof. Ina is known for her scholarship outside of this institution. But most recently, and it's always a really, I think, a rewarding thing to know that the institution itself recognizes you for that scholarship. And so with our recent Principals Research Day Awards, we had a new category, which was at the campus level for the best researcher. And so for the first time, with that particular award, this first awardee was none other than Prof. Ina. Congratulations, Prof. So, Prof. Ina, we next have a little video. I'm going to ask our team here from MITS if they could so kindly play it, and it comes from Dr. Michael Balik. He's the Vice President for Botanical Science at the Center for Plants, People and Culture at the New York Botanical Garden.
Good afternoon, Ina. On the occasion of this wonderful milestone in your career and life, I wanted to say congratulations and how proud I am to see all that you have accomplished to date and to celebrate your well-deserved acknowledgement this afternoon. Your skills in critical thinking, energy, vision, breadth and depth of knowledge, dedication to scholarship, teaching, and overall good cheer are respected and admired by all who know you. As you assume this professorship in such a distinguished and important field, department, and university, I know you will apply these talents and more for the benefit of the next generation through your mentorship of the students at the University of the West Indies. How lucky they are to work with you. And while your many friends and colleagues here at the New York Botanical Garden miss you, we send you our heartfelt congratulations and look forward to our continued collaboration. To our audience, I point out that while some honors are given for accomplishment alone, The highest ones are accorded to those whose work and life have both made a lasting difference. As Jonas Salk once said, the greatest reward for work well done is the opportunity to do more. And I know that you will accomplish much more in your new role. With warmest wishes, Mike.
Thank you very much. And so we'll move right along, and I would now like to invite Professor Rupika Delgado, who is the Director for the Caribbean Center for Research in Bioscience, and she is going to introduce the Lady of the Hour. Prof?
Thank you. I'm looking around. I will still acknowledge, I know we are expecting our deputy principal. Can you hear me? No? Can you hear me now? No? Should I use the other mic? Oh, you're hearing me now? Yes, okay. So I'll greet Professor Marvin Reed, who we expect shortly, acting deputy principal of the campus, honorable representatives of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining who are here, Your Excellency, Ellen de Geest, I'm getting your name wrong, Ambassador of Belgium to Jamaica, Professor Michael Taylor, Professor Marcia Roy, Prof. Ishan Kumba Kava, good to see you, sir. Chair, Dr. Busby Earl, Professor Vandebroek, distinguished guests, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen here in Kingston and joining us online, good afternoon. It's a true pleasure to introduce Professor Ina Vandebroek. Professor Vandebroek is an internationally respected and exceptional ethnobotanist whose work beautifully illustrates the deep and enduring relationship between people and plants. Her research has taken her across the Caribbean, Latin America, North America, and into communities where she has worked to document and understand the use of plants in everyday life. Through this work and through her 87 highly cited publications, she has helped to bring visibility and scientific recognition to forms of knowledge that are often passed down through generations. For over 15 years, Professor Vandebroek was based at the New York Botanical Garden, one of the world's leading institutions for plant science. As we just heard, she left an indelible mark there. We, in the Faculty of Science and Technology, Mona, were indeed very fortunate to attract Ina to Jamaica. And I would say that one of the unexpected gains of COVID-19 pandemic was welcoming Prof. Vandebroek to our campus. Knowing Ina, what is particularly striking about her work is not only its academic rigor, but its humanity. Allow me to illustrate this in 3 ways. First, Ina engages with communities not simply as subjects of study, but as equal partners in knowledge, approaching her work with respect, curiosity, and a genuine commitment to preserving heritage. She has authored publications with community members themselves as co-authors, an ethical practice increasingly championed by leaders in equitable research and benefit sharing. In an era where biodiversity and traditional knowledge are under threat, her approach, recognizing and valuing the knowledge holders within our communities, is as timely as it is essential. Second, she is a deeply committed mentor. She has guided over 15 graduate students to completion, with many more underway. Her influence extends across institutions, including us here on UWI Mona, Yale University, Columbia University, the University of Gastronomic Sciences in Italy, and Ghent University in her home country, Belgium. Equally, in her role as editor-in-chief of the Journal of Ethnobotany, she has shown an extraordinary commitment to developing researchers, particularly those from developing countries, where others might simply reject submissions, saying that they're not up to par. Ina invests time in improving them, uplifting both the science and the scientist. It is no surprise, therefore, that she's an award-winning editor. Third, she collaborates widely and leads large international teams. In fact, it is difficult to find an ethnobotanist somewhere in the world with whom she has not collaborated at some point. Such is the breadth of her scholarly network. These qualities speak to the type of scientist that she is: rigorous, generous, and deeply human. I suspect that these qualities are rooted in a nurturing foundation, one that began with her parents in Belgium, who I know are watching online. Hello. Instilled in her a love for nature from an early age, and continues here in Jamaica with a family who shares that connection to the natural world. Beyond her research, Professor Vandebroek is also a person of rich and varied interests. She has a love for cooking, particularly traditional recipes passed down through generations. Whether it is Jamaican ram goat liver cooked on a coal pot, fermented Korean kimchi, or wild harvested flour-based dishes, Ina approaches food with the same curiosity and respect and she brings to her science. Just last month, I encountered Ina beside a fallen tree near the Natural Products Institute building, lamenting its loss, salvaging parts of the tree to be replanted, and also its flowers. So when queried, she explained how the yucca flowers are traditionally prepared in Costa Rica with scrambled eggs. And true to form, she showcased the recipe at our research day the very next day. I am sure you will all come to fully appreciate the attention to detail to food that she does at the end of her lecture down on the corridor. So please stay. She also has a love for poetry, and I have had the privilege of reading some of her work, though I will refrain from sharing it today as Ina is a strong advocate for keeping time, and I value my standing with her. And finally, she's an avid photographer with an extraordinary ability to capture precisely the right image to illustrate a point. I'm certain we are in for a visual treat this afternoon. These artistic pursuits, cooking, poetry, and photography, mirror her scientific work in their creativity, cultural depth, and deep appreciation for the natural world and its connection to human society. Today's lecture, I'm sure, will reflect the richness of her journey and who she is at her core: scholar, humanitarian, collaborator, mentor, bringing together years of research, fieldwork, and meaningful engagement with communities across the globe. Please join me in warmly welcoming Professor Ina Vandebroek.
Thank you so much for these very kind introductions, colleagues. I feel like we can go straight to the refreshments because everyone has beautifully captured what I wanted to say already. Can I have the screen, please? Good afternoon, Deputy Principal of the UWI Mona campus, Dean of the Faculty of Science and Technology, Deputy Dean, Associate Deans, Director of Graduate Studies and Research, Ambassador of Belgium to Jamaica, representatives of the Ministry of Agriculture, Fishery and mining, heads of departments, colleagues, students, friends and family, people here in person and watching online. Thank you so very much for all the kind words and for joining me today. Today in my lecture, I will reflect on 2 decades of ethnobotanical research into the deep relationships between people, plants, and culture. After my introduction, I will begin my journey chronologically, starting with my collaborations with Caribbean communities in New York City, and then moving on to the Greater Antilles, specifically to the Dominican Republic, and then to Jamaica. But allow me first to say something about my journey as an ethnobotanist. As many of you know, I was born in Belgium, and you can see in the picture over there that even before I knew the word ethnobotany and I made my first plant collection, I was already clasping a daffodil. Because I've always had that love for nature, but also for language and for books. My parents were both, they're retired now, they're in their late 80s. They were both elementary teachers, and they always told me to take up your book, like, you know, mothers in Jamaica also say, take up your book and sit down, right? So that wonder for the natural world, but also for culture, was what started everything. But then there are many lessons that I've learned in my journey as an ethnobotanist that go beyond academic teaching, that really are learned in the field. And the first key lesson is that of listening. An ethnobotanist is someone who's interested in people, culture, and in plants. So we're doing interviews, and we're also identifying the botanical names of plant species. But in those interviews, it's very important to listen. A good interviewer asks questions and then gets out of the way. Another lesson is that of sharing and that of respect for other cultural worldviews and tradition. And if you see all those curves as an academic, right, I think most of us researchers can attest that we are not taking straight lines. It's going up and down. But those lessons of listening, of sharing, of respect, and reciprocity, we're not there to extract information and then run with it and build our career with it. We need to be reflective of our own position, be mindful, and then see how we can co-create projects together with communities and be good allies of community members. So at the end of my lecture, I will thank my academic mentors, but I want to start by honoring the mentors of plant knowledge. And of course, I have many more mentors than only 3 persons. But these 3 persons have also been key persons in my journey. The first is Don Eliseo Trinidad in the Bronx, New York. Don Eliseo taught me about the importance of being of service to the community. He also taught me about the multifunctionality of plants. Plants are not just medicines. They can be foods. They can have value for spiritual or religious well-being. They can be instruments and tools. You can make firewood of them. Indeed, you know, traditional knowledge systems and the ethnobotany research studies that document this holistic worldview, they have been called the science of resilience. The next person, Doña de Manuel, she taught me the Dominican equivalent of the Jamaican root tonic as a cultural, as a symbol of biocultural heritage. So I'll talk more about the Jamaican root tonics later. But that seed of interest was already sown when I was sitting with Doña Ana, and she was telling me about all the things you have to do to harvest the plants. Then you bring them in, you prepare them. It took a whole day, and we ended with candles. And then Miss Juna, or Edna Piercy, from Portland, Jamaica, was a farmer extraordinaire. She's now with the ancestors. But one day she took me to her family farm in Portland, and as we climbed the hill on which I took this picture, she said to me, "Look around you, isn't this beautiful?" And it's these three small words, "Isn't this beautiful?" that brought me to Jamaica. I also want to emphasize that my research themes and interests have expanded quite a bit from an initial, rather narrow focus on medicinal plants for community health, to then understanding from the many lessons in the field, again, that plants are not just medicines. They're foods, they're multifunctional, and the people who I interviewed in rural areas, they were all family farmers. So that brings you to farming systems and food security and food sovereignty. And as the results will show, family farmers are stewards of useful plant diversity. That brings us to the next question, that of conservation of biodiversity and preservation of traditional knowledge as living cultural heritage. Notice the importance of the word living. It's not stuck in the past, it's rooted in tradition, but it's modern. That logically leads to questions about ethics and engagement, respect and reciprocity, and how we as researchers can amplify the voices of the communities we work with and their struggle, which is real. So at the center of all of this are people, plants, and their traditional knowledge systems. And our advocacy to value these traditional knowledge systems as systems that operate in parallel with academic knowledge. And we have much to learn from them. So today, we are standing in a biodiversity hotspot. If we look at this graph that shows the number of seed plants across the Greater Antilles, and we just look at Jamaica, Jamaica has 3,218 seed plants. So those are the flowering plants, the cycads, and the conifers. And the yellow circles with the numbers in there represent the percentage of endemism. Endemic species are those only found in Jamaica and nowhere else on the planet. And Jamaica has a 34% endemism of its seed plants. That means that 1 in 3 of those species that you encounter is unique to Jamaica. I also want to posit that we're standing in a biocultural diversity hotspot. And although we do not have the exact numbers, the total numbers of useful plant species in any of the Caribbean islands, we do have a very rich ethnobotanical literature that can allow us to propose that, yes, those diverse human-nature relationships are present here. And what we can also see from this donut chart is areas where we can still build our collaboration. For example, there have been many publications on the medicinal plants in the Caribbean island region. However, studies are still lacking on the relationships or the impacts of climate change on useful plant species, or conservation aspects of useful plants. And I would also say cultural heritage. So we still have work to do. When we talk about the human dimension of this biocultural diversity, we highlight that there are diverse cultural influences in the Caribbean island region. But I will highlight two crucial cultural influences. The first is the indigenous American influence. And that those influences are still visible in the names of popular plants, such as the guava, which comes from guayaba. Taino name is guayaba. We have cassava. We have mami. But we also have maybe a lesser-known vegetable that is called Indian scale or Indian kale. And not many people today are using that vegetable anymore. But Auntie Poogie here in St. James is showing how it is prepared. So on the small inlay map, you see where it is native, and native is green. Another example is the plant that Jamaicans know as chew stick. Chew stick in the Dominican Republic is called Bejuco de Indio. So here you have, again, a reference to its indigenous origin. African cultural influences in Caribbean ethnobotany are also plenty. Let's think of the sorrel, the gongo peas, the ackee, the busy, right? But here we have John Craw beet, also known as wild licorice, or even jumbie beet. Its use across the Caribbean islands is very similar to its use in Africa, where it is native. This includes brewing the vine into a tea to treat hoarseness, and coughs, but also using the seeds as protective amulets and are using them as ornaments. And this is not something that you find in the Caribbean. When you go to New York City and you go to a botanica, and I will show you in a second what a botanica is, those beads are being shared and sold to Caribbean customers and beyond as well. So let me take you now and briefly explain the methods of our work as ethnobotanists. Ethnobotanists abide by the ethical principles, the Code of Ethics of the International Society of Ethnobiology. The ISE has worked for 12 years to establish that code of ethics. And core principles are mindfulness and responsibility to the communities we work with. So there are 17 principles and 12 guidances. When we are in the field, it all starts with relationship building and trust building. Not just with, you don't barge in with your project and you say, hi, I'm an ethnobotanist and I'm going to come document your traditional knowledge systems. Everything is based on prior informed consent. This means many conversations, discussions. Ideally, the project has been co-created, co-designed with communities from the start. Also during these conversations, community members and community leaders will be able to say what they want back from the project. And this is a sort of contract, an unwritten contract, an unsigned contract that we abide by. So then once we are actively engaged in fieldwork, we start with interviews. And the type of interviews that we follow are conversation with a purpose. So that means we have guiding questions, and we also allow people to, answer them in their own voice. Photo documentation to document the process of a project is also one of the methods, but everything is based on consent. The botany part of the project consists of collecting plants in the field, because after interviews, no doubt you get a long list of common plant species, but I will show you in a second why it's important to also know the botanical identity of those plants. And that happens in a herbarium. And here at the UWI Mona, at the Department of Life Sciences, we have a herbarium, which is an archive that holds dried plant specimens that cross-link information about them, where they're found, who collected them, the date of collection, but also often the common names and the scientific names, their botanical identification. So that's kind of the gold standard in ethnobotany research. Information from interviews that was obtained will be entered in a database. And then that database can be analyzed for knowledge patterns and trends. So I'm not a herbalist. I do not prescribe herbal remedies. That's not my role. I am an academic. I ask research questions. We develop hypotheses together, and then we do an analysis of knowledge patterns and trends. But that's not where the project ends. The project ends with what feedback, what are you going to give back to the communities? That can be guidebooks, that can be workshops. There are different ways to go about, and it's developed together with the community. So here are some pictures from the field, interviewing, looking at plants deep in the Jonkro Mountains, which is one of the main places where I've worked for many years. Collecting, pressing, and drying those plants. And then the pictures here to the right are in the herbarium, making sure these plant specimens that are dried are not getting molded. And then the long and tedious process of finding their botanical names takes place. We have books for that. You have Adams, the flowering plants of Jamaica. We have very specific keys with a lot of complicated terms for that. And some plants, identifying them can take days, weeks, or you never have the right collection with the right details, such as the inflorescences or the fruits, and you will not be able to identify them to species at all, unless you maybe collaborate with scientists who can do a genomic analysis. I also want to emphasize is when you're having long hours in the field, that is important to be able to know how to run a boat, like we say in Jamaica, and enjoy the rundown. There's nothing like cooking in the bush. So why now is it so important that we authenticate, that we connect these local names with their botanical species names? And that you don't just, you've interviewed your auntie and you said, the auntie said, I use sage. So you go on Google, sage. Mostly you will get the Mediterranean sage, which is Salvia officinalis. However, in the Caribbean, sage, or its Spanish equivalent, salvia, can be any of these 3 species, and likely more. So here you have 3 different species from 3 entirely different plant families. Also, when you get a common name like tuna, and you're, let's say, a natural product scientist or you're a pharmacologist and you want to go to PubMed and see how well this plant has been studied in the laboratory, and you Google tuna, you're getting articles on heavy metal accumulation in tuna fish. It's not what you want. You want to have the botanical name of the species. So now I'll start with the first project that I started working on in the Caribbean, related to the Caribbean region, because previously I had worked for about 4 years in Bolivia in South America on my first postdoc. But in 2005, Dr. Michael Balick from the New York Botanical Garden, who you just heard, he hired me as a postdoc to work on a Caribbean ethnobotany and ethnomedicine project at the New York Botanical Garden. And at first I was thinking, well, New York, there are no plants. Maybe I can interview people, but I thought this project that was a postdoc of 2 years was going to finish in 3 months, and I would go back to Belgium. But it took me 15 years at the New York Botanical Garden. Not only, I started working with immigrants from the Dominican Republic, so born in the Dominican Republic, now living in New York City. As you can see on this table, they're the largest immigrant group. And this project has expanded from work with Dominicans to include Jamaicans, Puerto Ricans, and also Mexican people. So these are also in the top 5 foreign-born communities in New York City. And in effect, 1 million New Yorkers were born in the Greater Antilles. And on these GIS maps, you see where they reside. And the New York Botanical Garden is in the Bronx. I also lived in the Bronx. So, you know, the communities, I just had to walk out of my door and a lot of people to talk to about plants. But then you still ask, but yeah, you can talk to the people, but where are the plants? Well, the plants are everywhere, literally. First of all, Jamaicans are the community, when they go back from Jamaica to, let's say, New York City, they fill their suitcase with bush and food and everything that they love from Jamaica. Another place are the Botanica. So you have literally hundreds of Botanica shops in New York City. And this Botanica is Don Eliseo's Botanica, and it says, you have treatments for any type of problem. And plants are really important straight from the Caribbean to these botanicas. You find hundreds of them, and you can find a remedy for any type of problem, whether it's mental, spiritual, physical, the solution is there. Don Eliseo is also holding a fresh, what Dominicans call anamu. And Jamaicans are likely to recognize it as well. Anyone recognizes Guinea hen wheat? Yes, Guinea hen wheat. He's showing a fresh bunch of Guinea hen wheat and also packaged and processed Guinea hen wheat in the other hand. So botanicas. You also have the New York City food carts with Caribbean foods, sugarcane, sour orange, mango, soursop, and so on. You want it, it's there. Finally, you have community gardens in New York City. And the lady here was showing me, was explaining to me about the bitter melon, which is the cultivated form of the same wild plant that we know here as cerasee. Behind her is a cabbage, and then you also see an amaranth species, which is known as red callaloo. You know, I ate callaloo in New York City before I set foot on the island of Jamaica. So for the project that I worked on as a postdoc with the Caribbean community, working first with people who had migrated from the Dominican Republic, the research question was, does migration influence plant knowledge? And if yes, how? So we did 174 interviews, my team members and I. 165 of those were people who did not identify as specialists. So people who self-medicate with plants. And 9 were plant specialists. That gave us a database of 4,179 medicinal plant use records. So when people come to me and say, can you tell me, you know, what is that species use? I have to say, well, let me check with the database. This referred to 302 different plant species. So in order to answer that question, does migration influence plant knowledge? We also had to do comparative field work in the Dominican Republic. And this is through Link, just like, you know, we have Link in New York with the Jamaican community. So yes, people send you to their auntie, their cousin, their uncle, their grandmother. And this is also the way in which the flows of knowledge and the flows of plants work. So in the Dominican Republic, we did 145 interviews in 4 provinces, and some of these places where we conducted interviews were rural areas, other urban areas. This gave us a database of more than 3,000 medicinal plant use records, which refer to 318 plant species. So here are some fieldwork pictures, interviews in rural Dominican Republic and in the capital of Santo Domingo, in the market there. Just like we have Coronation Market here in Dominican Republic, Santo Domingo you have Mercado Modelo. So then this graph summarizes the results of that research question. Does migration influence knowledge about medicinal plants? And the commonly held paradigm is that we are losing our biodiversity. We're also losing traditional plant knowledge worldwide. And that is partly true. However, if you look at this graph, and we did a multivariate analysis here, I'm showing the raw data. We did a transformation, a square root transformation to normalize the data, but I want to simplify it and show the raw data here. On average, Dominicans living in New York City reported 14 foods that they use as medicines. So here we saw that people were actually gaining knowledge about a specific subset of medicinal plants, the food medicines. So what are these? The sour orange, the lime and lemon, the cinnamon, the watercress, garlic and onion, and so on. So plants that are easily available. And this really challenged that paradigm of knowledge loss. Knowledge is not lost uniformly. Knowledge transforms. So we published about this in 2012 in the journal PLOS ONE. We also noticed, and I'm showing you here 2 examples, but it's a broad general finding as well, is that people started using these food medicines more often to treat chronic, non-communicable diseases such as asthma and also diabetes, hypertension, and sinusitis. This now brings me to Jamaica and the projects that were conceived there together with communities. Jamaica, or Jamaica, which is the language of the indigenous hummingbird Taino people of Jamaica, who are represented by 3,000 living members today, means the land of many springs, the land of many rivers, or the land of wood and water. This inlay map here shows you a different way of looking at the Caribbean islands, not by their geopolitical boundaries, but by the presence of indigenous peoples and their relationships, their networks. So in 2014, I obtained a grant from the National Geographic Society for a comparative ethnobotanical study in Jamaica. The collaborations were developed with a community in Portland at the foothills of the John Crow Mountains, the community of Windsor Forest, and we also did interviews in Painland, downtown Kingston, 190 interviews in total. My team members and I, Dr. David Picking, I see him there, was assisting me with the interviews. Again, we have a database of almost 3,500 medicinal plant use records. That's, from 100 interviews, it's kind of very impressive, referring to 174 plant species. So since we worked in a rural community and in an urban community, we asked ourselves, do these 2 communities differ in their knowledge of native and exotic medicinal plants? Because you can see each community mentioned in total, more than 100 species of plants. So here you see the community of Windsor Forest and the community of Painland in downtown Kingston. So just before I show you the comparison between the knowledge of rural and urban interviewees, I just want to briefly highlight top 6 of popular medicinal plants. They are ranked according to popularity in Portland, and you also see the ranking numbers there. It starts with guinea henweed in the upper left corner, going on to vervine, and you probably know all these species. So these 2 are native species, and all of the other species, the castor bean, the Sinkle Bible, the noni, and the cerasee are exotic. If we look at Kingston, you see that the 2 most popular plants are not necessarily native. They're Sinkle Bible and they're cerasee, so they're exotic species. So that kind of already partially answers our question. But this graph here, and let's focus on Jamaica first, shows that rural community members are really the ones who maintain knowledge of native species. So they are the stewards of native traditional plant knowledge. Here, completely to the right, you have people whose entire life history was rural. So these were the people who most often mentioned native medicinal plants. On the other side, you had people whose entire life history was urban. They grew up in Kingston, and they still are another city, and they still live in Kingston today. Those people mentioned the least medicinal uses for native plant species. And the group who grew up rural but then moved to the city have a knowledge base that falls in between. So you see that stewardship there of rural community members. Then I went back to the database in the Dominican Republic and looked at the data in that way also. And you see that here we have the same pattern. So rural people maintain knowledge of native medicinal plants. This is important for conservation projects. Also in 2014, master student from Yale, Mr. Logan Sander, he was very interested in collaborating with family farmers to better understand the useful plant diversity on smallholder farms. We call those family farms, on average 8 acres, and home gardens, the kitchen yards. Logan found through his interviews that farmers reported on average 43 useful species on farms. So this is an agroforestry farm at the foothills of the John Crow Mountains in the buffer zone. And I put some scientific names there, but you likely recognize a lot of plant species: coconut, chocolate, corn, bonavist, bean, yellow yam, okra, sugarcane, plantain. You also have callaloo, of course, pop chow, and the list goes on. On average, 43 useful species. Home gardens or kitchen yards are also very useful. They're smaller, but again, they contain on average, when 16 gardens were data from 16 gardens was compared, they contain on average 31 useful species. Let's say the basil, the Sinkle Bible, the plant they call ratties, the rosemary, the semi-contract or the semi-conscious, it's all there. These 2 agroecosystems contain annual crops that only live 1 year. Let's think of the pop chow, let's think of the amaranth, the callaloo. They also contain renter yam, perennial crops that grow 2 years or more. They contain wild plants. I don't know if you recognize this one. It's rat ears or rabbit ears or ratties. In Dominican Republic, they call it fresquita. In Jamaica, is used for the gripe of the baby gripe. In Dominican Republic, for fever. You also have tree crops in those agroecosystems. Let's think of the ackee, the breadfruit. Here we have the nutmeg, thank you. And you have timber trees, such as the Santa Maria. When Santa Maria is small, it can also function as a bendable tree to create traps to catch wild hogs. So again, over and over again, you see that multifunctionality of traditional knowledge. Plants are not just one thing. We do them a disservice if we only call them medicinal plants. They are so much more. The summary graph and the main finding, and this was published in Economic Botany, and you can scan this, and then it takes you to the article. The main finding was that farms are repositories of timber trees, a timber tree such as the blue maho, Hibiscus elatus, whereas home gardens are repositories of medicinal plants and sometimes also of food plants. They're wild plants such as the bird pepper. So this is very useful for food security and food sovereignty. So even though both agroecosystems contain all of these different types of plants, they still serve their unique purpose as well. So this shows the wonderful complexity of these man-made environments based on traditional knowledge. Miss Jada Tulloch, an undergraduate student from Columbia University, had been working on climate change perceptions previously, and that was her interest. And she collaborated with farmers in Windsor Forest to better understand their perceptions about climate change and their capacity to adapt to climate change. Here you see Brother. The type of agriculture in those family farms are smallholders, is based on manual labor, it's rain-fed agriculture, and there's almost no technological input. The results of Jada's interviews with 55 farmers across 10 parishes in Jamaica, where she interviewed from 1 person to 17 persons, showed that family farmers are record keepers of climate change and adaptation. Let's look at the data. 88% of farmers said that they saw a significant change in the climate between now and 10 to 20 years ago. 93% of farmers had noticed a shift in the typical dry and rainy season on the island. So either the dry season encroaching into the rainy season, or that there was a sort of inversion, where what was the wet season or the rainy season is now the dry season and vice versa. These are astounding numbers, especially when you see that only 44% of the farmers said that they had the capacity to adapt. So this is problematic for our farmers, and as academics, we have to see how we can help them. The farmers that did respond to adapting said their main strategy was to switch to crops that are more resistant to climate change, like in Portland, the renter yam that you see here, the gongo peas, pineapple, whereas the green vegetables, the tomato, the cucumbers, the scallion, the thyme, these are all known as climate vulnerable crops. And you see what our farmers are saying matches. I know it's kind of an old report from the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean of 2014, but already then Jamaica was ranked as extremely vulnerable to climate change. Well, it's great that we scientists do our modeling. I'm also someone who loves knowledge, patterns and trends, even though I focus on knowledge. But our farmers, they're the ones in the field experiencing this, and their perceptions should be part of the conversations. This brings me to another project on Jamaican root tonics. And I said in the beginning that in the Dominican Republic, my interest in this particular subject was piqued because they're doing something similar there, which they call a botella, a very complex plant mixture. But also in Jamaica, especially where I was working already a lot in Portland, I noticed that people would really seek out the deep forest, the deep woodland, to find these specific key plant species. So even though a root tonic can contain up to 50 plants, right? On average, it contains 15 different species. But people really appreciate the unspoiled strength of the forest, free of chemicals. And by collecting and using these plant species and preparing them as a beverage that you then drink, you transfer that strength of nature into the body. So it's a beautiful metaphor of the deep relationships between a cultural practice, which is a symbol of biocultural heritage, and the environment, the biodiversity. So here you see Mr. Buster holding 2 root tonic bottles that he prepared. And it happens all over Jamaica. Any parish you go, you find people who prepare root tonics. They have an auntie and uncle. And it continues in New York City. So here you see some of the species. So they're fermented formulations. People go deep in the bush. They collect them on the right moon, so 3 days before or 3 days after the full moon, because people say that is what gives the strength to the plants. We need this strength, we need this resilience. And if you look at the cultural origin, the stories, the oral history of it, it dates back into slavery times, where people had to find that strength in nature to be strong and resist slavery and be a resilient people. And even today, Jamaicans say, you know, me drink me root tonic because, you know, life is hard. And I'm a hard-working person, and that root tonic sustains me through the day. And the fact that when you go to Harlem, you find a person on the street selling, you know, Coca-Cola and Pepsi and I don't know what, and then you have a root tonic bottle. So again, it's not restricted to the island. It's everywhere where Jamaicans and other Caribbean populations are. So it's very beautiful. Here you see 2 of the most popular species in root tonic. It's 2 roots. So the one that they call the Dun, Smilax canalifolia, you might know it as cheney root. People say when you want to dig it, you have to fight it. So it's a strong root. That is the strength that I need for hard work in the field. The other one is Sarsaparilla. And you know, if you look at the European colonizers and the books they wrote, well, these species were already renowned in the 18th century. They were already piquing the attentions of the Europeans, and they were writing it down. Now, what they didn't know was the complexity of these root tonics. And look at that. More than 200 different plant species are used in root tonics in the 5 parishes where my team and I conducted our interviews. And on average, 15 plant species are used in root tonics. And the preparation can take 1 day, 2 days, and then you still have to ferment it. So it's a labor-intensive process. And first of all, you have to go to collect it. And people have gotten lost in the bush if you're not really from that area, but you want to venture out and needed to be rescued by the locals. I heard those stories. So what you see about the root tonics as well, because people go deep into the woodland or deep into the forests, the species that they use are prevalently native plant species. So it all comes down to that deep connection between culture and nature, and why we need to continue valuing our species, not only because of scientific curiosity or what we could, you know, let's say, the plant chemicals that we could extract from them and the product that we could develop, but because they are still a part of the living culture of people today. And beautiful, diverse species are used. Here you see a liana. It's an endemic species only growing in Jamaica. It's a legume. It's called Canavalia altipendula. Community members known it as tree-man strength. And you see it's a strong, again, the strength of that bush. It has 3 arms that are intermingled. That's a vine that gives you strength. You also have these tree ferns that grow on trees, very particular species that are appreciated. Are this one, standing body, Schibalium jamaicense, which is a root parasitic plants. So you have really native Caribbean species that are uniquely used by people. People experiment with them, they drink it, they see it works, and that knowledge is transmitted. It's knowledge by doing, it's orally transmitted as well. So if our young Jamaican people do no longer go into the bush, that knowledge will be lost. And when you lose knowledge about the plant, you will be less inclined to want to protect it. When we look at now I'm switching to the academic point of view. As the botanist part of my work, we can look at open access data from the Global Biodiversity Information Facility and look at localities where this particular species, the cheney root, known as Smilax canalifolia, has been already collected and documented, recorded. The area in green that you see in Jamaica, in Haiti, in the Dominican Republic, and part of Cuba is the area that spans all those collection points. We call this the extent of occurrence. Any area, any EOO that is larger than 20,000 square kilometers means currently the species is not at risk. But let's look at another popular species used in root tonics, the milkweed. This is endemic to Jamaica, and its extent of occurrence is only about 5,000 square kilometers. So this is a species that not only sustains traditions, but that is also at risk of extinction if its area where it's found shrinks further. The final project that I want to show has been funded by the Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund. And again, this is a very iconic species. It's called mountain cinnamon or wild cinnamon. Who here has heard about it? Well, I see my colleagues from CCRIP cannot. Yeah. All right. So it is a rare endemic species that only grows in the John Crow Mountains. And in 1998, the IUCN Red List assessed it as vulnerable to extinction. Again, this is a species that European colonizers noted down in their natural history books in the 19th century, saying that its use as a substitute for winter's bark, which is a plant from Argentina and Chile, is very renowned. So this species has nothing to do with the sweet cinnamon spice from Asia that you use in your kitchen when you're baking a dessert. This is a pungent tree species. It is spicy. Normally, traditional knowledge systems have directions to harvest this species sustainably. So you only take out a strip of the bark, as Mr. Bimsam is here showing, and you allow the tree to regenerate its bark. However, so this is not a story about unsustainable traditional use. This is a story of what happens when external forces come in and push away those traditional knowledge systems. This tree, when I started the project on Cinnamodendron corticosum, was still standing in 2017. In 2019, it was felled, and we measured its height, its circumference, which gives you the diameter at breast height, and we were able to calculate having this tree stripped of all its bark would yield an income of $1,200 to $2,000 US. You can imagine for someone earning the minimum wage in 2017 that this represents 5 to 9 months of stable income. This is where traditional knowledge systems are not able to maintain those guidelines for how to properly harvest the species. So there are only very few occurrence records of this species. So I set out with my team from the community, Mr. Jason West, Mr. Alvin Pierce, and here we are, armed with a compass, a GPS, a measuring tape, and a clinometer to estimate the height of trees we found, to put out line transects at the border of the John Crow Mountains in Portland. You see these 1 and 2. This is a series of line transects. So this is one transect series. So you draw out a line, you make sure you use the compass to do it properly. Each transect is a total of 200 meter long, and from where you have the rope, you go 15 meter on each side. Well, I wasn't going. Community members were going because they were the tree spotters, and they were walking the transect along the 200 meters looking for the Cinnamodendron corticosum. And here, again, traditional knowledge systems, we have to go make a collection, and then we try it, we press it, we have our magnifying loop, and we have our botanical key and our flora, and we're looking at all these minute details, and then we say with confidence, yes, this species is Cinnamodendron corticosum. In the field, a community member who's knowledgeable, who has traversed these hills, who knows how to read the green, says, oh gosh, I spot a wild cinnamon there. And I'm like, sure. Yes, we go there, and sure. When you're there, you can chip off a piece of the bark, and also, if turning back to this, it has characteristic brown dots, which are the lenticels. So, and then you look at the leaves, and indeed, it is a wild cinnamon. So, in this transect of 15 perpendicular transects, which took us about several weeks to complete, and you go wherever the transect line goes. If that means you have to ascend that cliff, that's where you have to go. And I also want to acknowledge the presence of Brownie, the community dog, who faithfully followed us everywhere in the bush. A main finding was that Cinnamodendron corticosum was very, very rare. Indeed, within the transect line area, we only discovered 2 species of the 5 species in total that we found in that area of Long Hill, Portland. And the one there to the left that says wild cinnamon felt was that tree that was still standing in 2017. Based on this data of that transect, we also did another transect where we recorded 7 individuals within the transect area, of 8 individuals in total, together with other locations where we scouted the trees, also led by community members. My colleague at the New York Botanical Garden, Miss Elizabeth Jelly, designed this smart map that shows you a map of the area and a maxent analysis on top of it. A maxent model is a model to predict the suitability, the habitat suitability where the species grows based on known presence points. Together with the climatic variables that you know are associated with these presence points, we can predict the suitability for this species to grow. This map shows us 2 things. Only the buffer area around the John Crow Mountains is suitable for the species to grow. And secondly, the analysis also shows us the most important variable that contributes to its habitat, and that is annual rainfall, contributes 80% to the model. Minor contributors are minimum yearly temperature and soil. So based on the species being so rare and being such a specialist, I would like to invite or ask my climate studies group colleagues if we can make a prediction into the future, run the model again, and then see, is there still suitability for the species to grow? Because oftentimes we are asked, how can we contribute to loss of species? And we can only do so much if other forces are at play, such as climate change. So this entire project would not have been possible without my dream team in the field, the people who know how to read the green in this green wall. My community members, my colleagues, my professors of the field. So this brings me to the final few slides of my talk, that of social justice. Together with an international team of colleagues, including indigenous scholars, we reflected on the question, how can we be better community allies? And we identified 3 interconnected levels, and we published this in the Journal of Ethnobiology in 2023. Yes, it starts in the minds of the individual scholars. How we think, what knowledge we value, what words we use, and who we engage with. Those values and choices then translate to our projects and the practice. How we design our projects, who helps direct them, and who has a voice and a stake in those projects, whose interests are being addressed by the project. The broadest base is that of our institutions, our universities, our journals, our publishers. Those institutions, those systems set the rules of the game. They can help push change, but they can also limit what is possible. So our main message here is, in order for change to happen, in order for not just me as an ethnobotanist and our other field scientists to be better allies of the communities to work with, but for anyone engaging with communities, what we need to do is realize that these 3 levels need to work together in order for change to even be possible. This brings me to the last publication that I will quickly talk on, which is that of fostering greater recognition of Caribbean traditional plant knowledge. We proposed an action plan with 8 interconnected goals. And I'll just take out 2 of those goals. One is using a systems approach. Let's stop fragmenting traditional knowledge systems. Let's not just say, well, that plant is a medicinal plant and that's the only thing I'm interested in, and then forget the larger socio-cultural context and environmental context in which these knowledge systems are maintained. So this invites interdisciplinary research and transdisciplinary research, and co-create our projects with our colleagues in the field. It also invites us to rethink education, right? To be more interdisciplinary, to be more practice-based, and to be more anchored in lived Caribbean realities. So to conclude, I would like to leave you with 3 main key takeaway points. Yes, traditional knowledge is rooted in tradition, but it's not stuck in the past. It is knowledge that is dynamic, and it's adapting to ever-changing social and environmental conditions. Second, traditional plant knowledge is not anecdotal. It's not a group of unconnected facts, little tidbits that we can tweet about. It shows clear and measurable patterns and trends. And I hope I've shown that through the case studies and the project that I've worked on, looking at in the diaspora, Caribbean diaspora, that there is a measurable shift towards using food medicines, that in rural areas, people hold greater knowledge of native plant species, that family farmers are stewards of useful plant diversity, and also record keepers of climate variability and change, that forests are, and the integrity of forests is linked to the maintenance of the cultural practice of preparing root tonics as a symbol of Jamaican biocultural heritage. And finally, that traditional knowledge systems can be vulnerable to external pressure of extraction. And then finally, that plant knowledge is relational. It invites us, when we walk out of the door and look at the trees we have on campus, to ask ourselves, what is my relation to these trees? Are they here? Were they native from Jamaica? Were they brought in? What is their cultural history? So it shows traditional plant knowledge as a living expression of human nature connections that must be recognized, supported, and included to contribute to those sustainable development goals that we're all working on as academics, but also, and first and foremost, for the benefit of the communities themselves. And I want to say that I'm very excited that since 2023, we have an Indigenous Studies research cluster here at UWI Mona, here at the UWI, not at the UWI Mona, and it's co-shared by our own Dr. Leslie Gale Atkinson. Shout out to you. Can you, right? They will have a talk in 2 days from now, and I think we should all log in and learn from and learn with the caciques, the leaders of the Jamaican hummingbird, Taino people, and all the other members in the cluster, because they're also working actively to address respect and recognition of their cultural knowledge systems. Rests me only to thank my colleagues, students, friends, and family. To the students that I've had the pleasure and the honor to work with, thank you from New York City to the Dominican Republic and the Bronx. Thank you for your inspiration, creativity, ideas, your drive, your passion. Be brave, be bold, continue with doing what you do. So I've worked with students who've gone on to become chefs, artists, conservationists, or academics, and the list goes on. to my mentor, Dr. Michael Balick, I would not be the ethnobotanist I am today without Mike's teaching. He does fantastic work in the South Pacific Islands, and his work is also very much engaged with communities, working on guidebooks and other reciprocal projects in which he works to amplify community voices. To my team and colleagues at CCRIP, formerly Natural Products, and you know, it's only a part of the team, but thank you for sharing a passion for research. And a special thank you to Dr. David Picking for being a team member on the National Geographic Society projects, helping with the interviews, and also, you know, planning for field work. These are often the unacknowledged parts of field work that make a project happen. Yeah, we made it happen, and that's a whole team doing that together. This is also a very special moment for me because when I was hired as a senior lecturer, I worked at the Department of Life Sciences, and here you have the Christmas staff party of 2022. And I was teaching principles of ecology with Dr. Camilo Trench, the best co-lecturer a person can wish for. And I'm not just saying that to be cute. It's really true. Dr. Trench, thank you so much. Finally, to the first family farmers in my life, my mommy and daddy, who told me to take a book and go sit down. But that opened a world of passion. Here they are in Belgium. They're not with us here today. They're in their late 80s, and they're in bed now. But they have taught me the beauty of loving plants and, you know, making your own breads, making your own juices, something we have in common with Jamaican as well. My father is using the apples from his garden as well as his beetroots, and we're feasting here. So this accomplishment is as much mine as it is theirs. Finally, to the funders of my research, because we can have bold and brave and creative ideas, but if nobody funds it, that's where it ends. So the National Geographic Society, who gave me 2 grants, and I hope some more grants in the future, the Mohammed bin Zayed Species Conservation Fund, who funded the work on the wild cinnamon, and the Cigna Foundation, who gave me 4 World of Difference grants to collaborate with Caribbean communities in New York City. I've only shown you a very brief part of that project in the interest of time, but I am immensely thankful to having had the luck, I would say, because writing grants is as much about skill as it is about luck, to be funded by them. And I want to leave you all with this quote from Frederick Cassidy, who wrote the Dictionary of Jamaican English. And the quote resonated to me because it's finding a place that we call home. And I want to thank the Faculty of Science and Technology, the entire family of FST, for giving me an academic home, and to all the Jamaican people for making me feel at home here every day. I found my home. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Prof. Ina. That was wonderful. But please don't leave the stage just yet. I'd like to invite Dr. Kimberly Foster, first and foremost. I believe she has something that she'd like to present to you. Dr. Foster? have to come around this side.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It is my distinct honor to thank Lady of the Hour, Prof. Ina, for a very incredibly insightful presentation that provided us with a deeper understanding of the relationship between people and plants. But beyond today's talk, we are gathered here with added joy to congratulate you on your promotion to professorship. And it is a true testament to your hard work, your dedication, and your continuous contribution to our culture and to academia and to traditional knowledge systems overall. And we thank you for sharing your expertise with us, and heartfelt congratulations to you again on your achievement.
Is this a lignum vitae?
It is. Yes.
Guayacan. It's Guayacan in the
Officer.
Taino name. Guayacan.
So I hereby present you with our national flower, Lignum Vitae, which is a representation of your commitment, and to say welcome home.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Foster. Yeah, you have another one. Give me, you can rest it there. No, not finished yet. Prof. Taylor, if you don't mind, please. And this one you'll have to unwrap.
Oh, you give. I think the faculty has developed a little bit of a tradition with our professorial lectures. I know the tradition is getting larger and larger. But on behalf of the faculty, we want you to remember this occasion. And I hope you will find somewhere where you can put this. But it is, just our expression of appreciation to you and to congratulate you on this occasion. I think it's taped. It's taped at the top.
Tear it if you want, it's yours.
And your son. You can move it over there.
Okay, and finally, I'd like to invite Ambassador de Geest, if you could please join us on stage. Prof. Ina has her own token to bestow.
Ambassador of Belgium to Jamaica, thank you so much for coming today. It's really an honor to have you here because especially, and I told my parents, because we speak every morning, that's the first thing, I get up between 5:30 and 6 o'clock, and I WhatsApp my mom and dad in Belgium. My mom, until a few years ago, did not use WhatsApp or any of that. But since I'm in Jamaica, she's using WhatsApp. But you being here is kind of a representation of them as well. So thank you so much. And I wanted to give you a little gift This is French thyme. It's a spice. You can also use it to prepare a tea. And then you have here a fishtail palm in the middle.
Well, now that I'm here, thank you. I didn't expect this, and I didn't really deserve this either. But now that I'm here, I just wanted to congratulate you. I didn't know you personally before I came here, but listening to the several introductions of you, I got to know you a little bit. And it's very clear how well appreciated you are, both on the academic level and on the professional level here in Jamaica. And hearing by your accent here and there, I think you're quite well rooted in Jamaica already. So congratulations. I think you represent the best of Belgium. The expertise we have, the commitment, the engagement, and congratulations. And I'm happy I could be here. It was also very interesting for me because, of course, this is an aspect of Jamaica. It's a little bit different than my daily themes of work. But that's why it was all the most interesting, and I was happy to be here. Thank you.
Ladies, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of this afternoon's lecture. However, I heard talk of landing a boat, I heard about wild pigs, I heard about apples and other fruit, and so there's some refreshment. Please don't just leave. I know that Prof. Ina has carefully selected what is on offer, so just to the outside in front of the Dean's office, please join us for some refreshment. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. I look forward to the next one. I don't know who that is as yet, but I'm sure most of us will be here. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the evening.